ahead and raise those in the chat. So today's session is having a look at institutional arrangements for setting up a greenhouse gas inventory. So a number of you were at our training a few weeks back where we had a look at inventory development using the GPC guidelines. And for those of you who weren't there, I'm sure you can engage with your colleagues around that topic, and the recordings of that training session are available for those of you who weren't able to make it and would like to follow the training. So today we really have a look at what kinds of infrastructure in terms of personnel and institutional infrastructure one needs to support that inventory development process. So let's just have a look at the outcomes of today's training, as you will get some idea of the legislative requirements in terms of greenhouse gas inventories, recognizing that they're fairly limited. But the core of the training really is around understanding the institutional arrangements, including the legal, procedural, personnel requirements to help set up a greenhouse gas inventory. We very much hope that today's session will help us to facilitate some peer learning. So those of you that are further down the line in terms of setting up institutional structures around greenhouse gas inventories will hopefully be able to share your learnings and your experiences in terms of the content that we're presenting today. And then final session of today, we'll actually have a look at what support needs you're going to be, we can perhaps provide you with in this context. So just before we carry on, the project is being led by Gondwana Environmental Solutions. Martin, I don't know if you want to just put in a quick word about Gondwana.
Thanks, Brett. Yes, Gondwana is a specialist air quality and climate change consultancy based in Johannesburg. We have been around for almost 20 years now, and we have the support on this project of Brett Cohen, who's introduced himself, and Luann Stevens, who I'm sure you'll hear from today. And we have a couple of our team on the line as well who are eager to learn as well. Daniela, Fleng, and Anya, I believe, are online.
Right.
Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, so I'm going to be perhaps carrying out some of the threads through today. I work as a consultant in association with Gondwana on this project, but the training is actually going to be led by Luann, who's really a guru in these areas. Luann, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, let me turn on my camera forward. Yeah, great. Hi, everybody. I'm Luann Stevens, and yes, for those of you that we've met already, it's good to have you back online, and also good to have a few additional people, because it's always good to meet and network with as many people as possible throughout the provinces to transfer information. So yeah, I'm Luann Stevens, and also like Britt, working with Gondwana on the ICAT project for today. I do a lot of, most of my work is on the greenhouse gas inventory at the national level. So you will see a lot of information that we take from the national level coming down to the provincial level. So I think the provincial level is now starting to become important. And so we need to start thinking about looking at provincial needs and requirements. And so hopefully we will get into that today, and also get to learn a bit more from all of you that are actually working on the ground at the provincial level, and get some insights from that, so we can share information around at the provincial level. So yeah, looking forward to today's discussions.
Great. Thank you very much, Luann. So in delivery of our outcomes, which I've presented to you already, we've set up an agenda for today, and really Luann and I have been talking, and we want this to be a free flow discussion. So it's not necessarily in direct order of how we're going to be presenting things, but the content that we're going to be covering today is we're going to start with an introductory session where Luann will present sort of to you the thinkings around what is required generally in terms of the institutional, legal, procedural arrangements for setting up inventories, and with a particular focus of the provincial session at the provincial level. We then also going to have some discussions around, and really comes back to what both of us have highlighted around the kind of sharing and learning from each other to understand what you've got in place already at the various provinces, what are the constraints that you are experiencing, and if there's any way that you can see these can be overcome, either through some training that we can perhaps provide, or perhaps you need to look at new roles, new functions, or new structures to be able to support the development of and the implementation of the institutional arrangements. We're then going to also focus strongly on roles and responsibilities. So who needs to do what, and where those responsibilities lie. We are going to highlight there, as I've mentioned before, kind of what does the climate change bill say, and we can have a bit of discussion around that because it is fairly limited in terms of inventory requirements. And then Luann's developed a bit of an exercise where we can actually get a hands-on feel through mapping out the roles and responsibilities in the inventory development process. And there are some templates floating around. One of them you will look at today for helping just to structure the thinking around that. And then finally, we want to bring everything together, all the discussions we've had and the content, and then map out the support that is required by the provinces on institutional arrangements, what kinds of support you will require. So that's it from me. I'm going to hand back to Luann, who, as I said, is going to run with the bulk of today's training, and then I will come back in a little bit later. So Luann, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Brett. Let's see if we can. Okay, so I think you need to just get this. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my screen, right?
Yeah, thanks, Luann.
Great.
Yes.
Perfect. Great. So, I mean, I think firstly, maybe just as I just wanted to highlight as well what Brett was saying, you know, we want this to be sort of interactive and more discussion. So, you know, please feel free to stop me at any point or ask questions as we go along. Yeah, so that we can have discussions throughout the presentation. So we have spoken, as Brett indicated, looking at institutional arrangements, focusing on around greenhouse gas inventory preparation. But I also wanted to mention that a lot of these institutional arrangements, as the structure of this, would apply also at a broader scale in terms of if you wanted to be setting up an MRV system, for example. So even though in this we'll talk more specifically from an inventory point of view, a lot of the structure and the general institutional arrangements and structure could be also used if you have setting up institutional arrangements for an MRV system. So the MRV system would just be a bit more expanded on that. So looking more to incorporate several additional stakeholders in terms of you may be incorporating adaptation and mitigation as well. But the basis of it will apply both to an inventory and an MRV system as well. So just so bear that in mind. So, you know, it depends on your needs and whether you want to be setting it up just for the institutional arrangements for an inventory, and then this could be expanded to include an MRV system down the line for tracking purposes. So today we're just going to talk a little bit about, firstly, what are institutional arrangements? Okay, so these are really quite a critical part of an inventory system. You need to have institutional arrangements set up prior to starting your inventory. I know that a lot of in many cases, inventory kind of just gets started and gets going. But as you start developing your inventory, you will find that having institutional arrangements in place makes the process a lot easier and a lot smoother. So these institutional arrangements are really formal or informal agreements between the lead agency developing the inventory and the various different departments, depending on national, provincial, municipal management teams, and all other institutions involved in the process of preparing your inventory. So the institutional arrangements really define the responsibilities associated with the inventory or your MRV system, and includes agencies and experts also that will provide information and data to that system, because they are part of the preparation process. So when we talk about institutional arrangements, it's really about everybody involved in the preparation of your inventory. Okay, but it should also be tailored to be sustainable under your circumstances. So this is why there's no prescription on what the institutional arrangements will be like, because it will differ from province to province, or at a national scale it'll be different. So there's, because of the different circumstances and the different resources available. So you need to have your institutional arrangements need to be tailored to your particular circumstances and needs. Okay, so what we are talking about in this presentation is more the general concept, and then as we go into the exercise, we'll try to have a look at it. You can have a look at it from your perspective at a provincial or a municipal level, what your requirements and circumstances might be. So why are institutional arrangements important? Okay, firstly, they provide structure, which is very important. As I say, it makes the process go a lot smoother if these institutional arrangements are in place, and provides more confidence in the whole inventory process. Okay, and these arrangements enable the provision of reliable and updated information to meet the needs of the decision makers. Also allows the inventory team to know exactly what they are doing, where they get the information, what their responsibilities are. So it really sets up the structure and provides a good guidance for everybody involved, and so ensures that all aspects get completed in a timeliest fashion. Okay, and it also helps in identifying the agencies and data providers and experts involved at the early stages. So that as you get into the actual preparation process, it flows a lot easier as you know exactly where you're going and who's doing what. So it really provides structure for the whole process. Okay, so there are various different components of institutional arrangements. So what we mostly always talk about is organizational mandates, which is what we've been talking about, looking at roles and responsibilities, coordination, the team involved, data supply agreements. But there's also, at a larger scale, there's also expertise, data flows that you have to consider, and also incorporating systems and tools to improve the process, and also consider stakeholder engagement. So all of these would form part of your larger institutional arrangements. So when we talk about organizational mandates, these are clear organizational mandates which guarantee the availability of experts, the flow of data, efficient systems and tools, and sufficient stakeholder engagement. So it really sets up all the organizational mandates and ensures that the data and systems flow so that your inventory can be compiled easily, well, with minimal distractions. So, and expertise also, we need to consider expertise as having as I'm sure all of you, that when you prepare inventories, sometimes you're not sure and you need to rely on some experts. And so having a team of experts ensures resources are available and you can regularly generate outputs that inform the decision makers. And so the team will be responsible for knowledge retention and transfer between the experts and local government or provincial level government. So there does need to be, whenever you're thinking about using a lot of expertise and consultants, need to think about the transfer of information to the provincial or the local government, because the idea is to build capacity within that. So that should also be considered in building up your institutional arrangements. Data flows, I'm sure this is always a big one with everybody knows you need to obtain the data. Without the data, you cannot have an inventory to start with. So data is really the critical component. So you need to have well-functioning data flows that to compile the inventory and also to get the data within appropriate timelines. Everybody has timelines in which they need to develop their inventory, and so having these data flows and identified your data providers really ensures a much sort of smoother process for the development of your inventory. Systems and tools. So effective coordination systems and tools ensure that the team is able to access data and to manage the process and the data flows and the QA/QC. So that's the quality assurance and quality control process. So all of these need to be managed, and so it's good to have the appropriate and relevant systems and tools in place to assist with this process. I mean, we spoke a lot in the last training around the inventory compilation process and using tools for compiling. So that could be one of the tools that assists in the compilation of your inventory. So we will have a look at that variety of systems and tools that could be used in your compilation process. We'll have a look at that as we go through the slides. Okay, and always throughout the process is also stakeholder engagement. Sometimes, we don't always think about the stakeholders, but it is, we mostly think about the data providers in terms when we think about stakeholders, and they are obviously are very important, and it's important that we engage with the data providers so that they gain buy-in and they feel comfortable and are then happier to perhaps share information and data. Stakeholders like to know what the information is used for. And so all of this interaction with your stakeholders creates buy-in and also leads to more confidence in the inventory outputs that you have. So it is important to keep engaging your stakeholders, both from when you have data providers, you need to encourage them to provide data, but also to inform people once you have your inventory, what the outputs are, what it means, and how people can be involved or encouraged to take action. And so informing your stakeholders is also quite an important of the overall process, which doesn't always get considered as much as the general organizational mandates. So these are some of the key sort of components within an inventory. And so we will look more specifically at the organizational mandates and developing the institutional arrangements for your inventory preparation. So there's a couple of steps in here. So I think it's important firstly to identify your current inventory management team, then do a stock take of all the components and institutions involved in the inventory process, map this out, institutional arrangements and structures for the inventory preparation process, then develop roles and responsibilities so everybody knows exactly who's doing what. And then also, it is also important to identify gaps because it may not be a perfect system in the beginning, but you use what you have. So it is important to identify gaps and to note these gaps so that perhaps in future situations, you know, there's a space where you can perhaps make improvements to the institutional arrangements to improve the process for developing inventories. So looking at, let's start with looking at your current management team. So obviously this is going to differ from province to province or from municipality at whatever level you're at, because you're going to have different resources available to you. So this diagram here just provides a set of possible roles within the inventory that you may need. But this will depend on who your available personnel is. So you need to identify how many people you have available to do the inventory. And then based on this, you can assign the various roles. Now, I know that we always go, well, we need all these people. We need an inventory coordinator. We need compilers. We need an energy and IPU lead. So it doesn't have to, in some cases, you have one person doing more than one task. And that's fine. It's just if we have a clear picture of the kind of activities that we need to do, then it ensures that we don't forget some of these activities. And so in many cases, I know that particularly at a provincial level, I mean, even at a national level, we have one person doing more than one task. So you can plan out the types of roles. This can be expanded. So here we have, there's always usually an inventory coordinator, which is very important, that really oversees the whole process. And then you have those that compile the inventory. You may have one person doing energy and IPPU and one person doing AFLU, for example. Or if you have one person doing all sectors, that will depend on resources available to you. We also need to consider a quality control process. And so often this is usually, for example, the IPPU sector lead can do a quality check on the energy sector. So it's, can be the same people, but doing several roles in the process. And then you could have a document manager or an archive manager. Again, this depends on how many people and resources are available to you. So you can divide these up and disaggregate it and have a much bigger team if you want, or you can combine some of the roles. But it's good to have an idea of the roles and what everybody is going to do. So this is just a base. This is a basic structure on what may be used. And so we'll have a look at the exercise towards the end, looking at, the specific from your perspective from a provincial level, what your structure and roles might look like. So you need to identify, firstly, your management team. Okay, so I don't know if we want to, maybe we can have some discussion now on the management structures within the various different provinces, because I'm sure that they will differ. So I don't know if anyone perhaps has some ideas on what the sort of structure is within your province when you develop your inventory. If anyone has wants to, I'm just going to open up the floor for a bit of discussion so we can see the differences between the various different provinces. So if anyone wants to let us know what is their sort of general structure within their province.
I see we've got two hands there from KZN in Walingo. It doesn't give a first name. And then, so if you want to go ahead, followed by Lisa.
Morning, Brett. Morning, Luwen. Morning, everyone. Inola is here from KZN.
Yes.
Okay, I'll start because I'm sitting at the bottom where it's not really mine. So as soon as I start, the better. Then I can release people to talk. Now, in KwaZulu-Natal, we've got myself. I'll just start straight from the climate change office without going up in the institution. We've got myself as a director, and they've got environmental control environmental officers, well, we are short of 2 as things stand now, but we're trying to convert 1 to be solely responsible for this task. And then from there, we can see then as to whether or not we can divide the sectors accordingly at the bottom, that is below here. But right now, we have only 1 control environmental officer that will take charge, like I would say maybe just assisting the management as well. And then we are also having 1 intern who has been introduced into the GHT. As we may remember, also Natal has done the baseline, and we are maintaining it. Also, we've also introduced the MRV as well. So we have that intern who's assisting us with that. We have thought of also bringing some officers who are working on information systems. We think that the younger the better. They do show inclination into basically the things that are required to be done. If you look at how the inventory is constructed and maintained, so we are going to bring the young blood, especially from the part of information management of the directorate. So that's how we envisage it's going to be done until we are able to build capacity that's required after we've lost the capacity of the 2 scientists that were working on the inventory. Thanks, right.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you for that input. I think that's interesting to sort of build it up from where you've got resources and then carry on looking where new resources are required.
Yeah.
So I think that's great.
Very good.
Yeah, Lisa, how's things in the Western Cape?
Yeah, so in the Western Cape, we've got the subdirectorate mitigation is in terms of the organogram, and luckily both is 2 people, and luckily we've been able to fill both positions. So the mitigation subdirectorate is completely capacitated at 2 people. Yay! So, and this work is done by the mitigation subdirectorate. So it's myself and Jody, who you met a few weeks ago. Jody only joined the team a couple of years ago, so he's only been involved in one of our GHG, in our first GHG inventory, but we've done the energy database since 2012. We've done it every 3 years, and that has basically been myself. There are people who have been useful data providers, but in terms of the management, the review, the collation, the report writing, it has been myself. In the last one, the GHG inventory, Jody did come on board, but it was very early days, and his capacity still needs to be built and grown. So we're hoping with this new one that through this training as well, he'll have a better understanding and be able to provide more inputs and take some of the strain off myself. But I think that's a challenge in most of our provinces and municipalities where there's literally 1, if you're lucky, 2 people who are working in this space, and it's not even a full-time job. It's I think for me it's one of, I'm just trying to do the maths in my head, 1 of 9 kind of key areas of work that I am responsible for as leading the mitigation team. So it is a difficult space. We do bring in where we can, but it is a huge kind of, so hearing things like a kind of the institutional structure, you kind of go, yeah, that's like me and 1 other person. So it is a tricky space to be working in. Yeah.
So just can I ask you a question on that? So even though you've got both your post full, do you feel there are additional sort of people in the office required in order to fulfill all the roles that Luanne's put up? Luanne, maybe you want to go back to the sort of, I think it was 2 slides ago.
That would be good. Yeah.
That one. Yeah.
I think it is. I think it is difficult when it's 2 people, because and especially if you're building the capacity of the second person, for example. I've been working with this data for so many years now. It's been over a decade that I can kind of look at an Excel spreadsheet and go, okay, there's a mistake because of the numbers not making sense. Whereas that just comes with time and practice. And so it's also when you're bringing people in, if you only have one person that you're building up and training, and it's a young person who's enthusiastic and is looking for opportunities to grow and develop, there is a very good chance that they are going to leave at some point. So for me, it would make a lot more sense to have a broader grouping of people, so that if one person leaves, it's not a huge train smash. And that's why we're trying to work with our colleagues in air quality, for example, on components that are very directly related to their work, and our colleagues in waste, so that they can possibly, through their processes, start collecting some of this data and analyzing it and putting the reports in place, and then feeding that into more of a centralized GHG inventory process. But we haven't quite figured out how that is going to work yet. So I'm very glad to see Claudia here from our Air Quality Directorate, because we want to see how we can figure out who else in the broader organization can work for us on this, rather than just having specific people within the team.
Great, thanks, Lisa. And I think what you've also pointed to there, and I don't want to preempt what Luanne's going to talk about later, but really around, or as mentioned, but also we'll talk to later, is around institutional memory and keeping the record keeping in place and that sort of thing. So that's a critical part of also not of dealing with that kind of institutional memory aspects of it. Luanne, I don't know if you've got any responses, otherwise I'll move on to Matthew's.
Yeah, I mean, I have lots of responses, but I think let's hear from Matthew first, and then I'll maybe make some comments.
Thanks. Matthew, please go ahead. Good to see you.
Thanks. Morning, everyone. I think the picture is similar to Liz and Oloisa as well. We're in a directorate with a lot of functions. In climate change, there's 3 sub-directorates. I'm leading the inventory part. Then there's RA with mitigation as well, and then Gerson with adaptation. Although it's province, so we do a lot of things, so you cannot really do one thing, as indicated earlier by Liz as well. Sorry, is there somebody talking?
Right.
Yeah, as I was saying, so at least on our side, at least on my side, we have some ability to tap into the both Ari and Gerson. Although Gerson is adaptation, he's done a bit of inventory work previously, same with Ari as well. Ari did the work previously as well. We do have an information management subdirectorate as well that helps with data storage, data manipulation, all of that. That helps a lot as well. Our equality the directorate also helps a lot, and the waste team. Outside the department, we do have like the Copter Energy team, which does a lot of work on energy, which helps a lot as well. The challenge is capacity on their side. But on our side, yeah, to split IPPU waste and stuff, yeah, it's still a challenge. But we also need a bit of capacity, but we're working on that. We'll see. Thanks.
Oh, Brett, are you talking? If you're on mute. Thanks, Matthew.
Sorry,
yeah.
I was on mute there. I was waiting for. We've also got Fazila's hand up from Lunga. Sorry, Luanne. Fazila, I think you're also on mute.
Okay, thank you very much, Brett. I'm Fazila Moyana from Mpumalanga Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, Land and Environmental Affairs. So in our department, we have an approved organogram, which is at the chief directorate level, the climate change and equality. But at the moment, we are on a subdirectorate level with consisting of 3 officials. One which is a coordinator coordinating climate change adaptation, and also just transition and mitigation. And then the other official is responsible for the adaptation part. And then the other one is an intern, which is me, responsible for coordinating climate change and also just transition. We also have one official which will be joining us from monitoring and evaluation. She'll be joining us recently, yeah. and we're also working closely with Saga and Cocta and other districts as well. And we also in our department, we since we limited capacity, we also assisted by climate change and pollution and waste management we assisted by pollution and waste management to do some of the climate change work. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Fazile. I think that's the lot, Luana, if you would like to respond to them.
Yeah, thanks for all of that. So I think I guess in a way that it is what I kind of thought it was going to be, which is it's always challenging because there is always so few people. I mean, I think it's even evident, at the national level, we still have national level still has a few more people, but as Lisa was saying, the task is always quite a large task, and it's never the only task of the people within national departments or provincial department. They always have many other roles to play. So it is understandably quite challenging. But I'm glad to see that the idea of working with other departments was brought up, because I think that is quite important, and especially looking at the links with the air quality, for example, and looking at working together with those working on air quality, because a lot of similar types of information may be collected both for air quality and for the greenhouse gas inventory. So I think the concept of working together with other departments or people that have experience is really quite important, to rely on the systems that already exist, and so sort of building up a team in that way. So it is challenging, and I totally understand working on inventories, that doing all of this task and collecting all the data. It's no small task. I know that, and so it is helpful to get as many people as possible on board. And as I say, working with existing systems is one of the ways. So it seems that quite a few departments work together with air quality, which is good. And it sounds like there's quite a lot of engagement with waste management as well. So I think using those existing structures to bring in extra hands is really good. So I think this is also, when we talk about all this institutional arrangements, and a lot of the presentation, Brett and I did have a discussion about, it's quite challenging because we realize everybody has one or two people. But I think it's worth kind of going through the understanding of what might be required, and just so it provides maybe a bit of structure to consider as departments gear up for not only inventories, but I guess for MRV systems and for tracking as well. So it just will provide some basic information. So we do realize that everyone is limited in the number of people available, but I still think some of the information will be useful going forward. So yeah, so Brett, I don't know if you have anything else to add on that.
No, thanks, Leanne. I think that is well covered. Nothing further to add.
Okay, well, yeah, it's good to get an understanding of the needs at the provincial level, and so let's see what else we can do, and also, we can think as we go through the process, if there's any ways that we can support going forward. Just jot those down, and we can discuss those towards the end as well. So once you have your team, that you've identified the team that will be doing, whether it's your 2 people or 4 people, then you can start to identify the broader groups involved in the inventory process. So this would include your data providers, your experts. Perhaps you need to bring on some consultants, any reviewers, or maybe as we were talking, discussions with air quality and waste management, or any national departments or stakeholders. So together that team can identify the broader group of institutions or agencies that may be involved in the inventory process, and have a look at and create a list of contacts. It's always important to keep a list of contact people for developing the inventory, because it's, I think there was also a mention that you build capacity and then people leave. This is also one of the big problems, I think. And also I think that, as Lisa was saying, you build up capacity, your understanding and knowledge with time, and it becomes easier. But with people gaining knowledge and leaving, there's a lot of training in between. So one of the things is to definitely keep a list of contacts, because on occasion it's happened someone's left and all the information goes along with them and the contacts with them as well. So it's good to keep an archive list of all the contacts available and where they are and what information they may provide, so that this can be archived and passed on should new people come into the system, so the information is not lost. So once you have an understanding of all the people that may be involved in the process, we can have a look at mapping out the institutional arrangements, like you developing your organograms of how things work. But you can look up on needs in terms of institutional setups, but then will there be a requirement for any legal arrangements or additional human resources or financial resources? So all of these can be considered when you start to map out the necessary structures. Even if you map out structures, as I say, and indicate some of them may be required for improvement in future, but having an idea of your overall picture and where you want to go is important. Yes, I see a comment. Just let me go to the chat. Yes, and also there's a comment from Lisa about storing data in multiple places. An emission database is completely lost because of computer. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we will talk a little bit about archiving, because it is really important. And I think it also comes down to the point that Lisa made about having more than one person involved as well in the process, because then at least if someone leaves, not everything is lost. There is some carryover. So trying to have numerous people involved in the process, even if it's on small aspects, small components here and there, at least you're building up sort of a team of people, so the information is not lost. Yeah, so in terms of the institutional arrangements, as I say, if you map it out and you look at all the information you may need, whether you need resources or having a broader picture and going forward, that you can at least look forward to how things can be improved in future, in what the ultimate system may look like in terms of monitoring all this. So you can map out this process for yourselves. Once you've developed the team, you can do this together with the team. I just wanted to talk a little bit about legal frameworks. I know that probably not a lot of legal arrangements or frameworks or binding mandates are there, are in existence currently for inventories, but it may be something that can be considered as we move forward. So legal frameworks, they may exist, such as frameworks that make government departments responsible for collecting certain data. So there may be some of these frameworks that are existing, but they may not be specifically identified for greenhouse gas inventory purposes. And so there may need to be some updates or some additions to these frameworks. So it may be new laws or expansion of existing organizational mandates, maybe service contracts and MOUs and data supply agreements. These are all various different types of legal frameworks that could be considered as as you developing this process. As I say, not only necessarily just for your inventory, but if you want to develop a full MRV system with adaptation and mitigation tracking as well, these legal structures may be relevant as well. In terms of just looking at expansion of organizational mandates, you know, I think this also, we had some discussion about using your current systems. It's always good to use what you already have in place and to build on that, to adjust it or to update it. Because when you have systems in place, they already have established relationships and coordination systems that go with that. So this not only goes for organizational mandates, but would also apply in terms of data collection processes. For example, if there are already systems there that are used for collecting, maybe not, as I say, specifically for inventories, but that could be tweaked, should use these existing systems where possible, because they already come with a lot of background and relationships and coordination within them. So adapting and expanding existing arrangements can be used resource efficiently and overcome institutional barriers. So then there's also service contracts or MOUs could be considered. MOUs may be considered if you have agreements between different government departments, or you may have service contracts with consultants, for example. And so we're just putting in some information that could be considered in these contracts. I mean, as I say, if anyone is interested in setting up contracts or MOUs, there is quite a bit of information, and we can always assist in information that may be relevant to incorporate into those contracts and MOUs. So here I've just listed some of the information, such as objectives of the agreement, the scope of the cooperation, the forms of cooperation, which include the methods or the frequency of or any restrictions on data, necessary resources, and how engaged parties will access resources. Obviously, your date and duration of the contract, and key contact points. So these are all just kind of aspects that you would include within service contracts or MOUs that you may want to set up for your institutional, to support your institutional arrangements. Similarly, data supply agreements may be specifically with data providers, maybe people that are collecting data already, but you want them to provide a particular data set to you. Setting up data supply agreements is obviously quite useful. I know that probably in most cases, we have the inventory compilers going out and gathering all the data and information themselves. I know this happens, is probably the main way that the inventories are compiled. But if there is opportunities to set up data supply agreements where the data can be, an agreement can be reached where data is supplied on a sort of more regular basis, then you have data coming to you instead of you necessarily going out and fetching the information. So you may want to think about setting up data supply agreements. So there's also various different structures for data supply agreements. Mostly a lot of the information is in a technical annex, which will relate specifically to the type of data you require, where you can specify what information you need, what format it should be in, the details, the real specific details of the type of data that you need, so that it is very clear. I think with all of these, the main thing is particularly with data, to be very clear on the data that you need. And I'm sure even when compilers collect data, you will find that they say, yes, we've got lots of data, and they send it to you. But you need to be clear on exactly what you want when you ask for that data, so that data providers can provide you with the most appropriate data sets. So these can all be outlined within a data supply agreement if sort of going the legal route is the way you want to go with that data provider. And so with these, you can set request data, including QA/QC details or methodology details, whatever you have discussed with that data provider. So these would all be part of your sort of institutional arrangements that you would set up. So, you know, when collecting data, you can ask these various data, and we can have a look at, you know, is there a contract with an organization? How was the request for data made? At what level? So these are also things that perhaps as you gain experience with gathering information for your inventories, you'll start to find perhaps requesting data in a certain way or at a certain level yields better results. So these you need to take note of what works for you in different provinces, and also it may also vary with different data providers. But you know, also need to consider how, because obviously gaining data is the most important part of your inventory. So you need to also think about how were various organizations motivated to share data with you. And in many cases, it's really establishing relationships with your data providers and informing them of how the data is going to be used. So this is where you know, sort of stakeholder engagements come in, because you want to try to encourage people to share data with you where possible. So these are just some of the things you can consider when looking for questions. So I don't know if does anyone have, I'm gathering most provinces go out and collect data, but I'd be interested to know if anyone has any sort of legal structures or legal ways of obtaining information. Yes, Lisa.
Hi, thanks, Luann. So most of our data collection is informal relationship building over years. We have in the past, we've had to do a non-disclosure agreement contract with Eskom to access the detailed information that Eskom is able to provide with us. That has been a significant challenge just from the time it takes to actually get the contract sorted out. So we are moving away from that route. I think the last time it took 10 months of just back and forwards to get the contract, the non-disclosure agreement signed between the two legal services. So that's always a challenge. But for us, we've also found that it's about that relationship building and working with people who are also doing data collection exercises. So we've been very lucky over the last few years. The City of Cape Town has undertaken very detailed emission inventory exercises as well as part of their CDP reporting and their energy planning. And they have provided us with access to that data. And the City of Cape Town makes up it's more than half of the energy consumption in the Western Cape. So it's a nice chunk of detailed data that we've been able to access. And then we also look for opportunities where other departments in the Western Cape are doing data collection exercises. So energy security is a big priority for the Western Cape, and our Department of the Premier and our Departments of Infrastructure and Economic Development and Tourism are all working on energy related projects that require data. So we make sure that we are informed of those data collection exercises, and where they, for example, are going into a contract with Eskom to access data, we will then ensure that the contract is written in such a way that our project can have access to the data that they are requesting, and to have it written in such a way that it is, because quite often it's very strict about how the data can be used and where it can be used, but making sure that the data can be used for multiple purposes, still taking into account the confidentiality clauses that there are, helps us that we don't have to duplicate processes and redo things. So that's been quite an interesting thing for us, where we've had those opportunities where people have where other people in the province have needed the similar data to us, that we've kind of piggybacked on their processes, and luckily for us that's happening again this round. So we should be able to piggyback on someone else's fights with Eskom to get data.
Yeah, I think that's, as I say, I think that's a really good way, and it's probably something that really should be considered when you're sort of starting your inventory and doing that sort of stock take exercise to really consider who else is collecting similar data. Could be different departments, as you say, and piggybacking off other existing structures is really very helpful. Also, I think it's helpful not only from this side of it, but also from your data provider side, because I'm sure it also gets tiring for a data provider to have 15 different requests for similar types of data. So it would be good in the sort of stock taking exercise to have a look at what kind of data collection processes are out there, both at provincial or perhaps even at a national or municipal level. Maybe they also have access, and then you can piggyback on that. Yes, Matthews, you have your hand.
Yes, as Liz was talking, I was thinking about there's a proposal I saw for a design of a new system, data collection system for national. I only read it briefly. I apologize for that. And it might be an unfair question. I don't know if you guys know already, if you guys are here, to indicate if that system, that design of a new system will alleviate some of the challenges that we have currently. I only read it yesterday. I apologize. Thanks.
Yeah, is there anyone online that I don't know that can answer that? I don't know, it's something we maybe can look into, Matthews. Perhaps you can take it up a follow up with that with the national departments on that to find out exactly what that's about and whether that can assist provinces as well. So that's something we can note to follow up on.
Luann, can I see the question? Maybe you can comment on.
Yeah.
So if you go back to your previous slide, what you said is one of the things around the DSA is around QA, QC measures to be applied to the data prior to supply. Now we are running a second training as part of this series on QA, QC. But any thoughts on managing sort of substandard data as part of a DSA?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, as you say, we try to obtain quality to data, and I think this is one of the things that when you're talking with data suppliers, if they can provide information on any quality checks that they do, it's not something that is always requested, but it is useful if you can get information from your data providers on whether they did any verifications or quality control checks on the data so that you can understand the quality of the data. If it isn't done by the data providers, then I guess you need to have a look at applying some quality controls from the inventory side, which it's a bit harder if you don't have a full understanding of the data, how it was collected and where it was coming from. So yeah, it is harder. So it's obviously good if you can also get the data providers to provide you with that sort of type of information on sort of quality checks that they have already completed on the data sets. As you say, we can look at more in detail on the quality control in the next workshop. But yeah, I don't know if anyone's had any issues with, well, I know there are many data sets which you have to go through to identify which ones are most the best quality data or verifiable data to include within your inventory. And I'm sure in some cases there are, when there's no data, you may have a need to use what data you do have. So, yeah.
Thanks.
I mean, it's the same with, I think that perhaps with provincial inventories, it's not as important looking at sort of uncertainty ranges on data, which also is kind of related also to quality control. But if you can include these in agreements that you have with organizations to provide you with that information. It does assist when you are trying to assess the data and the quality of the data and how to use the data. So it is important to sort of include these aspects within these data supply agreements where possible. Okay, are there any other questions or comments at this point? Let's see any more hands. Okay, so right, so I think we wanted to move on to looking at once you have it all mapped out and you know who is going to be involved in the processes, then you also need to have a look at establishing roles and responsibilities. I think this is quite an important aspect because it is important that everybody within the inventory process knows who is doing what. Otherwise, something maybe you don't do it because you think someone else is doing it, or you know, I doubt there's any duplication, but that can also happen too. So I think setting out roles and responsibilities, clear lines of roles and responsibilities is very important for establishing a good process that flows very easily and everybody knows exactly what they're doing. So this should cover tasks, you know, looking at from planning and management to who's collecting the data, provision of data in a timely manner. When is the data going to be provided? Looking at who's going to be selecting emission factors or where the emission factors are coming from, inventory, who's doing the compilation and the calculations, who's doing quality control, report preparation and reporting processes. So as long as everybody knows exactly what they are doing, I know as we were saying at provincial level, there's usually only one or two people, and so the collaboration is a lot clearer. But if you have more people and you're interacting with air quality or waste management, you need to be clear on who's doing what, who's collecting what information, and who is communicating to who. So these roles and responsibilities are important when you start involving several people in the process. Also, I think what is important perhaps from provincial level is lines of communication, not only within the team, but is there a need to provide information sort of vertically to national departments or to municipalities. And so you need to consider in part of these roles and responsibilities is who's going to be responsible for doing those. So what is the communication? What are the communication lines like, and who is going to be doing all of that? So these are aspects. So there may be other aspects that you can think of that are more specific at a provincial level, because as I say, from a national level, it's usually always down, but in this case, you've got vertical and horizontal. And so these need to be considered when establishing roles and responsibilities as well. So this is really all about understanding who you have available and what their responsibilities are, who will be doing what, so nothing gets forgotten or duplicated along the line. Okay, so so I don't know, this may not necessarily, because as I say, we've had a discussion earlier where we see that most of the provinces have two or three people involved in the process. But yeah, have there been any challenges in terms of the inventory systems, in terms of conflicting of responsibilities or unassigned responsibilities and things that, you know, get forgotten along the way? Yes.
Yeah, Louise, it's not also here. No,
Yeah,
not that. Just a question on back to the QC, QA.
Yes.
Supposing, let's say we're talking about the energy sector, and you've been like the data provider. Okay, can your data provider do your QA, QC?
No, so there's different levels. Maybe we can define this. So there'll be different levels of QA/QC. So the quality, when your data provider gives you data, they can give you information on the quality of that data. You know, maybe they've recorded a whole lot of data, and there were a lot of outlying points, and they've done some processing, and they've done some checking and verification on the specific data that they're providing you. Then they can provide you information on the quality of the data that they are providing you, you know. But then there's also the quality control checks of when you utilize the data within your inventory and how you use it and doing the calculations. Those are a whole lot of other quality control steps. So there are various different points, but your data provider can provide you with information on the quality of the data that they are giving you. I mean, if they're giving you, if they only have one data point and they're saying these are annual emissions, and they've only got 2 data points, or it's not representative of where they're, you know, that kind of information is valuable to you, because then you can understand how best to then use that information. Is it of good quality, or is it just, you know, so that's what we're talking about in terms of the quality control from your data provider point of view. So yeah, they can do those kind of checks, but you obviously always have to look at your data and do other checks along the way. And I think as you build up relationships with your data providers, you get to know which ones have good data sets or have verified data sets. And so you'll get to know which are the good data sets to use. I mean, I think one of the other points maybe I wanted to bring up in terms of that Lisa was talking about, building a lot of the data is collected around building up relationships with people. And I think this is also the case, often the case in a national department as well. But we did have an instance, and this also comes similarly to that comment that was made about saving your data in different points. Building up relationships is great, but if you have building up relationships with data providers and there's one person building up those relationships, if that person leaves, then those relationships can break down. And this did happen at one point a few years ago in the national department. A lot of data was provided because of relationships built up and trust built up with a particular person in the inventory team. And then that person left. And so then there was a breakdown, because then there was a new person that came in, and you kind of got to start all over again. And so having these relationships is really great. But I think it is also important to either have more than one person building up the relationships, or, you know, having, you know, it's just got to be aware that there is the possibility of breaking down should the relationships been developed, you know, specifically with people within the department. So I think this is also why, you know, it's the best. I agree it's the best way, but if you wanted to have more formal, then it's less likely to break down. But you know, I think we all know that having relationships with data providers is really critical for them providing information. So it is unavoidable in some cases, but we need to consider maybe having more than one person doing interactions with data providers, so that there is some continuation. Should one person leave, those relationships can still be followed up going forward. So yeah. Okay. Yes, Lillian.
Thank you so much. My name is Lillian. I'm in the Northwest Rustenburg local municipality. Yes, I think my interest is also on QA/QC. Because I remember when we were busy with our climate change management plan, we had a service provider who helped us on that, and then the data was collected by the service provider. But now, if we have to do it, being a small team as we are, and having to establish institutional arrangement is not much of a problem. But the data that is going to be collected from, say, different sectors, can it be sent to State South Africa Quality Assurance Framework, that is the SASCAF, just to make sure that it is verified? Because whatever data that we use has to, many times, it is considered verified, it is considered yeah, of great quality when it goes through SASCAF. Can we do that as well? There's a two-pager, you know, some kind of a format wherein you put in all the data and then you send to State South Africa Quality Assurance. Can we do that? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, that's maybe that's a new process, but I don't know if anyone else has had any experience with that. But if you can send it to Stats SA and they do quality assurance, yeah, I'm not exactly sure how that process works, but I'm sure that would be considered as a quality control check. You've had an additional person checking the data and verifying the data. So I don't know how that process works. How do they verify the data? But yeah, I mean, if it's being checked by another person, then that is considered as a quality control process, which you can document along with your inventory as having been done. So yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if anyone else had used that process. Yeah, so as I said, I'm not sure how the process works, but
Never heard.
yeah.
So never heard. It would be interesting to learn, Lillian. But I'm just wondering also, you know, I worry when it comes to Stats SA because of the way their data is structured. Okay. I'm just wondering if it would be different if they would not be checking your data against their surveys, or because now there's also, you know, a data provider could be having more updated stats and data compared to Stats SA, supposing we are talking about the 10-year, the data that's based on the 10-year release. I don't know if it's the same thing. And also, just for me, what would also be interesting, I don't know, what I think maybe we could need from DFFE is to actually help us to establish the parameters against which we can be saying now our data is QA and QC, instead of trying to try different things and going all over the place. Western Cape is done this way, and KwaZulu-Natal that way, Free State in that way. I'm sure they can try to have some form of a uniform guidance for us so that we don't go, because imagine if you did, if your one was done, if your one was done against SSA and my one was done against whoever else that I consider to be credible and so on and so forth, it means maybe there's some form of lack of uniformity. Not that our data will always be the same anyway, but I just worry about the lack of uniformity. State SA could be more credible than the other, and so on and so forth. But I think maybe going forward, unless of course there's something wrong with what I'm saying, I would want to think that maybe DFFE could kind of provide some guidance so that at least we can maintain some form of uniformity. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I think that's a good point, and you know, I think it's excellent to highlight needs that provinces may have, which a national department can assist with. So we can certainly look at that as something as a need going forward, and we can also perhaps provide some further guidance in our QA/QC session, which will be, I think, in 2 weeks' time. So we can look at that. But yeah, I mean, that's why I was saying with the Stats SA process, I don't know what the process is. So I don't know how they're verifying it. So you may need to understand the process of what are they doing to quality quality check that data. What are they comparing it against? You know, so you need to understand that. So I mean, quality control and quality assurance, it does vary because it depends on the type of data that you've got, and what you've got to check it with. So it's, you know, quality control can be you can check it against if you have other data sets that you can check it against, or if you have maybe ground-based data, at various different sites, and you can do a verification of the data. So quality control does take many different forms depending on the type of information that you have. It's also looking at data in terms of just looking at the lay of the data. As I say, there may be outlying data sets that you need to assess and whether that is realistic or not. So there are many different quality control procedures. We're talking now specifically around the actual data. I mean, there are also inventory checks that you can do in terms of you using the right emission factors, and you have doing the calculations correctly. So there's all those other kind of inventory quality controls. But I think what we're talking about specifically now is more around the actual data quality. So yeah, so in terms of, it's difficult to answer with the stats question because I don't know how are they verifying that data, because to verify or quality control, you need to check it against something. So I don't know. We'd need to find out what their process is for checking the data and what are they checking it against, for you to be able to really say whether that quality control process is effective. Okay. So, I mean, it's good that there's lots of questions on QAQC, because we'll note some of these points and then try to address them during our next session on quality control. Okay, I don't see any more hands at this point. Right. Okay, so, and then as I mentioned, in terms of your we always talk about inventory improvement, but you can also improve your institutional arrangements. So it's good to have a plan and identify gaps. You may identify gaps once you've sort of been through the first cycle of your inventory, and then it may be easier to identify where the problems lie and how these can be improved. So it's the same with the inventory. You always have to think about what improvements you can do, but you can also do it to your institutional arrangements as well. So document these as you go through your inventory process, and these can maybe be picked up in future inventory development processes. Right, so that's really a lot about sort of institutional as mandates, should we say, organizational mandates. But we also wanted to talk a little bit about systems and tools, because this also helps with the actual preparation process of your inventory. So to make it smoother and a good free-flowing process. So when we talk about systems and tools, I mean, this can also be applied again to a sort of MRV system as well, if you wanted to look at the bigger picture. But when we talk about systems and tools, people often go, oh, that's like bigger picture. But systems and tools don't necessarily have to be complicated. They just are tools that you can use to improve the process and the preparation process. So, for example, they can be simple things like having a work plan in place, having data management and archiving, and good data structuring, and again, your QAQC system. So it doesn't need to be complex. So you can have a work plan. It can be based, example is just really around your inventory preparation process. This can be used to guide who's going to do what and by due dates, but it can just be a regular plan. Doesn't have to be around the preparation cycle, but as long as you have a clear work plan that defines milestones and deliverables, this can be a tool that can enhance the inventory preparation process, and something that gives you step-by-step process through for the inventory preparation. So also data management. I think we've had a couple of questions about management and archiving systems from Lisa about storing data. This is also having a system in place. This doesn't have to be like a big system. As you say, your system could just be as long as there's a plan, you're going to store it here and here and here. Since there was a discussion about storing it in more than one place, this is very important. You don't store it on someone's local computer and then they leave or it gets corrupt and you lose the data. So it needs to be stored in some kind of central system, and also perhaps in more than one place, somewhere that's accessible by everybody, so that if one person leaves, it can be still used by the new people coming into the team. So just having these structures in place and understanding, and everybody on the team being clear where the data gets stored and how it gets stored, and also knowing how to access it the next time the inventory gets updated as well. So just having these structures and archiving systems in place is also a tool that helps the preparation process. And also, when we talk about storing and archiving the inventory, we're not only talking about the data. It is important to store the data, of course, but it's also important to store information about, for example, the institutional arrangements, so that when the next inventory comes along, people know who is doing what and can understand how it was. So this information is also important for sustainability and going forward, and maintaining an understanding from as people change. So keeping information on institutional arrangements, also all the methodology and the documentation, list of your stakeholders or reviewers, or quality control logs that you have. So all of this information, all of this sort of information needs to be stored along with inventory, not just the final report and not only just the data. So because all this information is valuable, particularly when you have people leaving the team and new people coming in. It provides them with information that they can pick up and continue, instead of having to start all over again from scratch. Okay, so yeah, so these are also things that need to be considered in your data management. Then there's also just things like your data structuring, how your calculation files are structured. There's just some good practices in terms of using your standard classifications if you're following GPC, and using standard file naming. Does everybody on your inventory team know how to stay? I mean, actually, this is a really important point, because when you're doing an inventory, everybody must know how to name the files, and if you make updates, how are you going to deal with that? Do you put another version number on it? Do you save it somewhere else? Do you keep it the same name? These are important things to discuss and to lay out upfront with the team, so everybody is quite clear, because keeping track often of files and updates can get quite confusing if everybody is using a different kind of naming system. So even that is really quite important. So these are just important tools to set up before you start. Documenting QA/QC procedures. So, you need to communicate with the team that if some procedure gets done, a quality check gets done, make a note of it somewhere, either in your calculation files or in your documentation, because these are all important pieces of information. If you're using spreadsheets, for example, you can use color coding to make it more visible in terms of what inputs, what are calculations, what has been reviewed, what needs to be checked. So color coding is a good way to do it, and also document any information about modeling and assumptions. So all of this information is important to document either within your files or within your management system or in your report. And this is really around building a sustainable system. Okay, so having some of these good practices are basically tools that are used to make the process easier going forward. And also perhaps to follow standard output for reported data when you're thinking about developing your emissions report as well. So these are also important things. And as I say, we've spoken quite a little bit about the QA/QC, as I say, to document any activities that you've done, to have logs and to have improvement plans are all part of the QA/QC system. And we have spoken a little bit about that, and we will probably go into more detail on that in the next session on QA/QC. So having these tools available and using them within the inventory system improves the preparation process. So as I say, it doesn't need to be complicated systems or tools, just the basic systems, but make sure everybody is clear on the team how to use the systems, how to document, how to archive, and your roles and responsibilities will also indicate who must do what, who's doing the archiving, who's doing, so all of those things help in making an improved process. Okay, so yeah, so maybe we can just open the floor again. So having looked at sort of the description of inventories, institutional arrangements, and tools that are available, would you say from your provincial perspective, do you think your institutional arrangements are well defined, or do you think they could be improved, or haven't really got any institutional arrangements or not defined? Perhaps people can even just jot down in the, you can put up your hand, or if you want to just jot down something in the chat. How do you think, based on this sort of information we've provided, that your institutional arrangements for your provinces, where do they stand at this moment? Can they be improved over time? Yes, Matthews.
Yes, I would say we definitely not where we'd like to be. We're still in the process of actually defining it. But yeah, there's a lot of work ahead. But yeah, it's not well defined.
Okay, great. Sorry, I can't see. Let me just see whose hands.
I think it's
Tabani.
Tabani's next.
Tabani, right.
Yeah, sorry, we are sharing the office. My colleague is going to mute. Yeah, thank you. I was looking at my director to answer the question. But in the case of KwaZulu-Natal, the institutional arrangements are defined. In fact, they were stronger when we started the process back in the year 2020, 2021. But I think things fell through the cracks. So there's definitely room for improvement in terms of us strengthening our institutional arrangements. That's what I can say in relation to the work that we are doing as KZN. Thanks.
Great. Thanks. I mean, I think it's always I think with inventories in all cases, whether it be institutional arrangements or developing inventories, there's always room for improvement. I think that's one of the problems with inventories is there's never an end. There's always more to be done. But I think it's good to understand where you are in the current situation, and then what can be done now to improve it, and what are things that need to be done in future to improve that. So I think as long as you are aware of those activities, then it will develop over time. So yeah, it's never perfect.
I think just to add, between then a couple of weeks ago and now, we just still need to find time to actually compare, because a couple of weeks ago we were working on the GPC, so we just need to see what the inventory that we developed, the baseline that we have, as to whether or not we need to merge it, as to whether basically what we left on exactly, because the guy who was working there now is no longer there, but we have not checked as to what exactly we use between IPCC guideline and the other guidelines, so that we can just make a decision as to what exactly we need to use. Then we can.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's good to.
So I muted myself. I didn't realize. I think you got what I was saying.
Yeah. No, it's good to see evaluate, stock take where you're at, and what you're using, and then and move forward from there. So yeah, that's good. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone else has any information in terms of their provinces, and whether do you have people set up roles and responsibilities, and are there any sort of really glaring gaps that in institutional arrangements that perhaps need to be addressed, or that, within your provinces? Does anyone else have any other inputs from that side?
Maybe, Loen, there is a input from Free State, but it's on the chat.
Oh, okay, sorry. Let me have a look. The Free State institutional arrangements are not defined as yet, since the old inventory was developed in 2012 and has never been reviewed. However, climate change units, air quality and waste management will be working together on a way forward. Okay, good. So yeah, and I think that in many cases, everyone just starts off doing the inventories and not really, well, as you say, there's usually only a few people. So institutional arrangements are not thought of up front, but I think it is, as start moving more towards with the climate change and looking at climate change responses and tracking adaptation and mitigation, perhaps institutional arrangements will become more and more important as you have start to have more reporting to do, or more data to gather, and perhaps a growing number of people to work with, then institutional arrangements will become more and more important, because it's really critical to understand and work together towards their common goal. And so understanding what everybody is doing and how it all works together will become more and more important as we move forward. Just want to see where we. I don't know. I was wondering, Brett, whether we should talk a bit about maybe the climate change bill at this point.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. And I think it does make sense to jump in there on that. And I mean, one of the things that we spoke about, is what is the actual obligation for provincial and municipal governments around greenhouse gas emissions reporting in terms of the Climate Change Act. And so we went through the Act and tried to pull out what we understood about this, but we also are aware that many of you have been engaged in the development of the bill and what will become the Act, and so we would value your feedback in sort of if you had understood this much differently to the way that we had. So what we had seen in the bill is really that there's a requirement for the current intergovernmental forums to also serve as provincial forums on climate change. So it's to sort of extend the Premier's intergovernmental forums responsibilities. And the responsibility of this forum, amongst others, is to coordinate the climate change response actions within the province and to provide a report to the President's Coordinating Council. But then one has to go and look a bit deeper as to what is meant by this climate change response actions, and how does that actually relate to inventory compilation. Sorry, just one more point before I unpack that a little bit further is that there is also a need, just in terms of, or an opportunity, if you like, or a possibility of establishing an intergovernmental technical support structure for this provincial forum. So that could, in theory, include support on emissions accounting and MRV. But yeah, then we tried to have a look a little bit deeper as to what the climate change response assessment, needs and response assessment, actually involves in terms of inventories. And just in terms of timing, there's a requirement that within 1 year of the publication of the National Adaptation Strategy and Plan, so noting they're not the mitigation, anything around mitigation, that's when the climate change needs and response assessment must be developed. But then the only real mention of anything related to inventories comes out in the same chapter of the bill, which suggests that the climate change needs and response assessment must identify climate change response considerations, again, very loose. And then 3B suggests it must include measures or programs relating to both adaptation and mitigation. So interestingly, from our interpretation of the bill, this is the first real point where anything related to emissions is mentioned in terms of provincial obligations in terms of the bill. And this note around mitigation measures needing to be included. And then one could deduce from that if you're going to do mitigation measures or programs, one might need some sort of emissions accounting. And really, from our interpretation, that's really it. So in summary, I guess the climate change bill provides very little indication of the need for a provincial inventory to be developed, and certainly doesn't provide much guidance at all in terms of roles and responsibilities around development of that inventory. So that's really where we understand the bill to stand on this matter, but would be very sort of appreciative if anybody has any other interpretations of it, or indeed through your discussions with DFFE have identified any further drivers in terms of the bill for provincial action with respect to inventories. So any thoughts on that one? Lisa, please go ahead.
Yeah, so we've had similar interpretation. It very much reads that the role of provinces and local authorities, and it's important to acknowledge that the bill only refers to metro and district municipalities. It doesn't refer to local municipalities at all.
Yes.
Which for us is a big concern, because a lot of the action in terms of climate change response happens at the local level in terms of constitutional mandates and who's responsible for what. So excluding local is a big thing, but that's another story. But it very much read to us as the local, the adaptation component is the responsibility of the provincial and local authorities or district authorities and metros, whereas mitigation is very much a private sector response linking to the climate budget, the carbon budget, and the work around SET. So it's a very weird kind of split that they've made. There's also been no regulations or guidelines or technical descriptions of what this, and I can never remember what it's called, the needs and something assessments, the documents that
needs and response assessment.
Yes, yeah, it's been years, and
I'm not sure if am I the only one who's lost Lisa?
Still here.
No, also lost Lisa.
Sorry, my internet dropped.
Okay, no, you're back now. Thanks.
Yes. So yeah. So it's not very clear on how things are going to work at a provincial and a local level. There needs to be a little bit more guidance on what do those requirements at the provincial and the local level look like, so that we can really understand what we are required to do. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that input. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad it accords with the way you've understood it. I mean, I suppose the only other area of responsibility around mitigation would go to national government departments in terms of responsibility for the sets. So you mentioned private sector, but I'd probably suggest that national government departments. Do you see any devolution of those national government department obligations around sets to provincial and, as you say, metro governments?
So there have been guidelines developed last year on the role of provinces and local authorities in the SETS process and how we would need to feed into those national departmental processes. We had an engagement about it. I'm trying to think, I think it was sort of late last year, and we gave input into the guidelines, but there hasn't been any further because we had some concerns about kind of the structures that were being recommended and how do we actually, as provinces and municipalities, feed into the departmental processes. You know, you don't want 250 or however many municipalities and how many provincial departments, contacting each of the national departments to get their input on what is your SETS target and how do we feed into that. So it's a, you know, there needs to be sort of more of a structured approach, but yeah, that's still we're happy that there is a mechanism in being developed, but there needs to be more clarity again on how exactly that's going to work to streamline processes.
That's great, thank you. And that is a component of this project over the years to look at target setting for provinces. So we will be engaging a little bit later on during the year with respect to this topic. I don't want to go too much into that at this point, but yeah, we will be coming back to you on target setting. I think it's Nadia Yiso has got her hand up.
Yep. All right. No. Also, just not trying to dwell much on it. I think maybe we can just have faith in the fact that there's going to be regulations coming. I'm hoping they can clarify a lot of these. I remember raising the issue of local government very sharply, but it seems that still fell through the cracks. However, I think colleagues, and I'm just talking to provinces now. We just need to apply practicality, or rather practical measures. I saw the National Department shifting from their strong stance on some of the acts, like for instance, the Equality Act, looking at the practicality of the fact that if you require LM, that is the local municipality and the district, to do this and that as a string as the hierarchy would go, you've got a district, you've got a local. It has been found to be very impractical until it reached a point whereby they said, we're just going to say if the district has it, then the locals will be taken to be having it, except the locals that cannot be exempted from that requirement. And then they specified the examples of such local municipalities that had that were dubbed to be having bad state of air. For example, if you say in KwaZulu-Natal, you require all the municipalities, all the districts, all the locals to have the equality management plan. And then after, say, how many years since 2004, after almost 20 years, you still stand no chance of having those HMPs developed, and districts were seeming to be having, the trend was that the districts are the ones that would have those ones mostly, and then the locals that could manage to have them, like the city from Mhlathuze, the city of this and that, what to goes and other, but not the ordinary LMs. Then it dawned on them that no, let's just look at the fact that others would manage to have and others would, and also how they prioritize their lives in terms of equity matters within this district and in their locals. So I think as practical as possible, this is the topic that we can take offline with the National Department. As provinces, we just need to see who actually, like in KwaZulu-Natal, which municipalities can we make sure that they can actually drill down to their inventories. I would say, City from Mhlathuze, you make sure that you do this. You, City from Sunduze, you Kwatuguza, and the rest of you, let's just see what you pick from your district, because I mean, it's only practical to do so. So that's specifically what I'm thinking of that. What's going on?
Great, thank you very much for that input, Noloyiso. Yeah, I think these are things well noting. There was another hand up, but it seems, I think Tabani had his hand up, but has gone down now. Would you like to still speak?
No, thanks, Brett. I've been covered
okay.
by what Noloyiso has said around the issue of regulations under Chapter 6. I think the regulations will be able to add flesh to some of those areas that are currently maybe not so clear. Yeah. And I think also for national, it's easier to manage the 44 districts as opposed to managing the districts plus the LMs. And if they were to also look for funding to help in the development of some of the plans from some of the international organizations, it will be easier for them to get funding for the 44 as opposed maybe to supporting the other LMs. One of the challenges that locals will often raise is the fact that some of the mandates are unfunded, and as a result, you'll find that they are not able to comply. But if we were to say, okay, Amajuba district in KZN, I'm making an example, we fund your plan, then we know that that plan will kind of reflect on the 3 local municipalities. And as Nolo also indicated, there are those that you cannot exonerate from the process, like your secondary cities and your metros. So I think to a large extent, some of the issues will be clarified in the regulations. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. Luann, would you like to respond?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I was just thinking in terms of, some of these, I was just thinking in terms of some of these questions that are coming up. I was just wondering, as part of the project later on, we have a sort of awareness session where we will be having speakers, to build awareness around the bill. So I'm just wondering if maybe some of these questions or issues that are coming up now, maybe we should jot them down and try to find speakers during that awareness, those awareness sessions to perhaps address some of these issues. I don't know, it's just a thought.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that would be worthwhile. All right. I think we all are on the same page, largely on the same page there. All right, Luann, should we go back to you?
Okay, yeah,
sorry, I'm wondering if one needs a 5-minute comfort break. I don't know how much more material we want to carry on with.
Yeah, I was going to say I've just got one more slide on sustainability of systems, and then I thought maybe we can take a break, and then we can always come back and look at roles and responsibilities after that, if that's okay.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so I just wanted to, so we've talked a lot about institutional arrangements, and so I just wanted to talk a bit. I've just got one slide here on sort of key elements to sustaining institutional arrangements, and so these are just some thoughts in terms of what is needed in order to sustain the institutional arrangements. And so one of the, obviously the important things is to have mainstreaming of climate activities, so high level alignment with the climate agenda, both national or provincial strategies and action plans, and aligning department targets. And then also obviously having high level support and funding is also critical for sustaining these arrangements, both top-down support or bottom-up support. Sorry, I don't know why the slide keeps moving. And then also having a look at having terms of reference of objectives and performance measures for experts. And when using consultants, I think we had touched on this in that there should also be plans for long-term capacity building and knowledge sharing so that information can be transferred to government departments as well to assist in maintaining these systems going forward. And obviously expert career progression. I think this is maybe a difficult one because improve staff retention to attractive career paths. And we know that a lot of staff gather a lot of experience and then move on. And so this is a tricky one, but trying to improve staff retention would also build up sustainable institutional arrangements. I think also a couple of other points that we've highlighted through this process in terms of having more than one person involved in the process also allows for continuity and sustainability in some of these arrangements going forward. But basically, you need a whole lot of activities around these institutional arrangements with support and mainstreaming to really sustain these institutional arrangements, both for inventories or for MRV systems and mitigation and tracking going forward. So it needs to come from all different, support is needed from all different levels. Okay, so that's pretty much what we have on institutional mandates and arrangements. I thought that it might be useful. I don't know if to just have an exercise. Yes, I see a question. Is there a question? Tabani, do you have a question?
No, no, no. It was
No.
a mistake. I wanted to react
Okay.
with a thumbs up.
Okay. So I think we'll take, let's take a, I don't know, 10-minute break, and then we can come back and do an example with roles and responsibilities. Before we do that, it might be good if everybody has just registered. I'll put the link again, the registration link in the chat, because I think if you can do that, then we can also send out some templates for you to use. So if you can just register, then we have all of your emails, and we can send out a template, and we can work through those after the break. So let's see. So what is it now? It's 5 to, so should we come back at 10 past 11? Would that be okay with everybody?
I think that sounds good.
Okay, great. So we'll see everybody at 10 past 11. Okay, I don't know if everybody's back. We can give it a few minutes, but I did say all of those that had their names on the registration link. I have sent you just an Excel file with some roles and responsibilities on there, which we can use as a template to complete to go through during this session. So if you want to check your emails, if somebody has not received the email, maybe you can just pop your email into the chat and we can forward those documents to you. It's just an two Excel spreadsheets. So is everyone, whoever's back, if you can just do a thumbs up so we know if we should wait a bit longer or if everyone's back. Okay, I saw a few thumbs up. I'm just going to get my screen sorted out.
Let's go save. Save.
Right. Okay, so I just thought, yeah, I don't know, just thought it might be an interesting exercise to look at look at roles and responsibilities and to, just have a task for everyone to start because everyone's going to have a different structure for their different provinces. So perhaps I just thought everyone could look at the spreadsheets that I sent. So I sent a spreadsheet firstly with roles and responsibilities. We'll look at that one. I did send also a diagram of the national, oh, okay, now I see mine's closed. Just give me a minute to find my spreadsheet. Where is it gone? Okay, sorry, just give me a minute to open this diagram. Okay, so I sent you two files. The first one is on roles and responsibilities, which looks like this. So we have responsibilities and then this sheet on roles and responsibilities. So what I've done here is in the responsibilities, I've listed a variety of possible responsibilities. A lot of these are taken from the national level. I initially was just going to have a list of responsibilities, but I have also included the possible roles on the side. But based on, as I say, based on your situation within your province, these roles may be different, and you may be wanting us to assign responsibilities to different roles and to different people. So this is just really to have a look at a list of responsibilities that could be relevant to the preparation of the inventory. Some of these may not be relevant at at your provincial level. So we can just go through the list. I'm sure there also may be additional responsibilities that you can think of that would be important to include at the provincial level. And so we can just build up. So what you can all do is have a look at the list of responsibilities and add anything that you think is relevant to your province, or remove anything that you think is not relevant, just to the list of responsibilities. And then what we can do is move over to the sheet on roles and responsibilities, and then you can, based on your province and the people available, assign what roles you may have. So we have inventory management and coordination, which is really things like your inventory coordinator. Then you have the different compilers where the role may be, it may just be separated into the different sectors, or it may just be overall inventory compiler, or you may want to list them as energy sector, waste sector, but assign the same person to each of them to make it so that it's clear for everybody to see. So you can add in basically the roles that you have, the data providers, contact names. Obviously, you won't be able to fill in all of these now, but it's really to have these sort of inventory management and compilers. And then from the list of responsibilities that we have over here is to assign these responsibilities to the various different people and the different roles, so that everybody is clear. Some of the responsibilities may be relevant to more than one role. You know, if you're having to communicate between team members, so this may be something that can be assigned to more than one role. But basically, the idea is to have a complete list of responsibilities that you feel is important for the inventory preparation, and then to assign these responsibilities to the various people. Also to consider, so the data providers, they could be a very long, could be a longer list, but also to consider down here the QA/QC and archiving management, who would be responsible for doing QA/QC. Again, you may have an overarching person to do all of that, or you may want to assign and say, person X is responsible for QA/QC on energy sector, or on overarching files. So you may want to break it down into disaggregated level, and to then assign the various different responsibilities taken from the list in the beginning. So this just is a list of what we can fill out on the roles and responsibilities to ensure that nothing is that everything is clear and nothing falls between the cracks. I did also send you another document, which initially I was going to use, but I thought it may be more flexible to use the one I've just shown you. But the national system design just gives it more in a structured process, where this may for you be a provincial authority, and then inventory management and coordination, sector compilers, and data sources, with the quality controllers and the reviewers on the second page. So this sheet just, you know, if you prefer to use this one, just shows generally the activities and the competencies needed for the designated authority or for the inventory management. So, okay, I don't know why there is an echo now.
I think somebody has their microphone open.
Is that no, it's not better. Okay, that's better. So I just sent this to you because it may have information. Again, you know, we need to adapt some of the information from a national to a provincial level, and so, but some of this information may be interesting or relevant to you. So it's just a different way of structuring it, showing the actual activities, and it shows competencies in case you're wanting to know to take on a new person, what kind of background would be useful for them to have in order to carry out these various tasks. So I did just send this national system to you in case this is something that is relevant or has information relevant to you on it as well. I just thought though, maybe for today's purposes, it may be just quick and easier to use this Excel spreadsheet. So I think we can start by just looking at, you can have a look at the list that you have of responsibilities and then deciding if there are any additional ones that you want to add into the responsibilities or any that you think are not relevant to you. And so I don't know if you want to do that if it is helpful if we just all go through it, or do you want to do it individually for each of your provinces, because it may be different for everyone.
How long must it take, Luan?
No, we're just going to, we obviously can't complete this entirely, but I don't know, we can assign, well, we have half an hour left, so this is really what we've got to do, so we can work on this in the next half hour. Or well, maybe next 20, let's say 20 minutes, so that we have a bit of time to wrap up after that. So I don't know if you want to work on it individually and then come back in, and then we can have a report back in 20 minutes, say, of what everybody has developed. Yes, Tabani?
My suggestion, Luan and colleagues, is that we work on it collectively so that we understand the basic principles. Then individually offline, we can then look at our provinces. Perhaps we can look at each role, each responsibility, and say generally these are applicable across the board, and these would be province specific, etc. That's my suggestion.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it may be better to work through it together. So let's do that, and then you can use it, and you can always go home and use what we have done so far and make it more province specific. Okay, so if we look at the list of responsibilities, we can see that there's a whole lot. So maybe we'll just go through some of them, and people can indicate if it's relevant or not. Or if they think of other ones. So here we've got, so somebody has to be responsible for delivering the final greenhouse gas inventory report. I think that would be relevant to everybody. And to have engagement with stakeholders. So obviously you have your compilers will be engaging with the stakeholders or data providers, but there may need to be the inventory coordinator may need to sort of oversee the engagement process and initiate those initial engagements with stakeholders and data providers. So this could be a task that could be assigned to the inventory coordinator to initiate those, and then we can just have individual data provider engagements under the sector leads, for example. So I don't know how everybody, it's a good point though. Does everybody, when you compile your inventories, do you have actual, besides the engagement with data providers, do you engage with other stakeholders as well in terms of outputs or any other stakeholder engagement processes? I don't know if I'm looking at all the hands. Yes, Lillian.
Yes, thank you so much. Looking at what we're supposed to do, it's a bit tedious. As the local municipality where we are now, the last inventory was done, I think it was 2013, 14. So you still need to, set up your things, your institutional arrangement, go back then, and seeing with the local municipality, when you deal with issues of climate change, it will be a small unit, and yeah, you still need to convince people with the mainstreaming. So it might take a bit of time. And again, I don't know, maybe the province will come in to support as well as the district. Yeah, but I think there has to be somewhere where one would have to start with the institutional arrangement. And the whole issue of coming with the greenhouse gas report, inventory report, is another one. It's going to be a bit tough for us as a small unit, but I think if we rope in the district as well as the province, there might be something.
Yeah, so
I don't
mean,
know whether there is a time frame as to when the report is to be submitted. Are there time frames? Because this is for the first time that I attend this.
Yeah, so I think there's no specific time frames. I mean, I think all provinces are developing their inventories at different levels. So yeah,
okay.
so maybe, yeah, since you haven't been involved, maybe I'll just give you a little bit. So all we are just through this project, we're just providing support to different provinces, because with the climate change bill, there's going to be more emphasis on provinces and local governments you know, playing a role and playing their part in doing inventories and setting targets, for example. I mean, in order to be able to set any targets or to put any actions, mitigation actions in place, you need to have an inventory to understand sort of what your situation is and, you know, what sectors should be targeted for mitigation activities. So the inventory forms the sort of baseline for what you need. And so inventories, I mean, provinces are all at different, we realize that provinces are all at different stages in terms of their development. Some are or have done previous inventories and are updating new ones, and some have only done one, like yourselves, a while ago, and so it needs updating. So there is no specific deadline for doing an inventory. So our process in part of this project is really just to provide support to provinces in understanding on how to do an inventory if they are thinking about doing an inventory, and providing support in terms of if you need institutional arrangements. So when we, through this ICAT project, we always sort of do a training session, and then we have a period where we are, Brett and I on the team are available to provide support if you need to ask us questions about your inventory or how to get it going. If you haven't started, how to get it going, or maybe if you have an inventory and you need our support in terms of looking at a certain aspect of the inventory, then that's what we're here for. So if you're at the early stages, you can think about ways that we can support you, and we'll also just, you know, send out emails at the end of each session to say if anyone province needs our support, they can let us know what kind of support, and we will try, we have a bit of time to provide you with support. So the aim is really to support provinces to get everybody started with their inventories, but there's no specific deadlines for everybody to have compiled an inventory. So I hope that explains the situation a bit better. So this session is really just introducing you to institutional arrangements. If you don't have institutional arrangements, it's giving you a background on the types of things that you need to think about as you move forward to set up institutional arrangements. So yeah, so it may be new to some people, and other people, they may be ahead. So that's why it's different for every province. And so we're giving an overall, but then if you need specific, more detailed interaction, we can have set up a meeting and discussion specifically with your province after the meetings as well. So I hope that gives you an idea.
Thank you.
Matthews, you had a question or a comment?
Yes, I actually lost my train of thought. But the part of the lead organization, in terms of the national inventory, are we talking DFFE or DFFE sourcing? a service provider like Gondwana to do the work. Is that what you're talking about when you said lead organization?
Okay, so yeah, so when we talk, sorry if I talk national, it's just as I say, provincial is needs some adaptation. So for national, you have a lead organization, which will be the DFFE in this case, because it has obligations to report internationally to the UNFCCC. So there's usually a focal point, UNFCCC focal point within DFFE, and so DFFE becomes the lead organization for reporting to an international level. But if we're looking at a provincial level, it may just be, you may not need to have a lead organization, may be obvious, or you may just have your organization being the provincial department who's responsible for the climate change. So they would be maybe responsible, so in this case, not reporting internationally, but maybe for informing national level or for informing municipal level the other way. So it's slightly different at a provincial level, but it's basically the person that's going to be in charge of doing or overseeing the whole inventory process. So yeah, so if things are not like necessary or is it obvious at a provincial level, then this can all be changed. These are, as I say, these are just all of these responsibilities and roles are just guidelines. And so to give you some ideas of what maybe you can incorporate at your provincial level institutional arrangements. So yeah. Okay, so
sorry, just as a follow-up before I forget. In terms of reviewers, would you recommend external reviewers? Because normally you would have a project team and a steering committee. Steering committee on our side would be like DFFE, some of the municipalities and metros as well. Would you recommend even with that external reviewers?
Yeah, so reviewers, well, I don't know how you do it currently. Reviews can be done internally and externally. So externally would be if you have someone outside of the whole inventory process doing the review. So and it is good to have reviewers outside, because they see things when you're working on an inventory, you're right in the middle of it and you get involved and you maybe not see certain things, whereas an outside reviewer, what we would call a second pair of eyes, is always a good idea. Sometimes having an external reviewer may, though, involve a cost if you want to hire a consultant to do a review, for example. So it would depend on the funding available. But I mean, an alternate would be, although this already, I was going to say you could have, someone from district level or municipal level having a look at it, or a different province having a look at your inventory as well. But again, I think it's all down to resources available and time to do that. But certainly, if you have the ability to do an external review, it is much better for your inventory, because they do see things that people involved in the inventory don't always pick up straight away. So, for example, at national level, we do both. We have normally we have the public comment process as well. That does it at a national level. So we have a public comment process, as well as then usually an external consultant is hired to review the inventory as well. So it does have two levels of review process. So it may depend on what resources you have available for the review process. I mean, if you don't have a lot of resources, it could even just be, as I say, you could have someone from the team, maybe from the agriculture sector, reviewing the energy sector, just so at least there's a second pair of eyes going through and checking for mistakes and things like that. Okay. Yeah, there's just a question about sharing the presentation. Yes, we will share the presentation as we did with the last workshop. We will share all the information and the recording with everybody. So you don't need to worry about that. It will be shared. Okay, all right, so no more on stakeholders. So there was a comment from KZN that they have stakeholder engagements with data providers, but not general stakeholders after that. So that's probably the main, I suspect, is similar with other provinces as well. So so if you have your stakeholder engagement here, data providers, you may want to, so that depends. This engagement with the stakeholders may be you want to assign to the inventory coordinator, or you may want to assign this responsibility to the sector leads who will engage specifically with the data providers relevant to them. Yes, question? Eliso?
That's a quick comment, not even a question. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, assuming, let's just say the issue that you discussed at length earlier on about QA, QC, and let's just say maybe even just data verification in general. I was going to suggest that, okay, number one, my first suggestion was that we get DFFE to kind of give some direction so that we can at least have some information, although we acknowledge that we won't really have everything like the same. Okay, now that is one. But secondly, I think the strong suggestion for me would be to say that we really need to have this area streamlined so that we don't subject ourselves to some extended institutional checkpoints, if you know what I mean. And let's pretend this is also relating to stakeholder engagement or management, such that we are going to meet people who don't actually know what we want to achieve, and therefore giving us all kinds of negative opinions until we lose direction and we basically don't know where we are going. And remember, some of us are at the starting point, others are in the middle of things, others are only just reviewing and maintaining. Basically, we're at different stages of our inventories. So now you must imagine if you take yourself to some institution because you know that they are a data, this and that institution and what have you, and then you find that they only just know a particular way of doing things in terms of data streams and everything else, except what you want to achieve. And they won't keep quiet. They probably will say something to the negative effect because they don't really understand what we want to achieve. So that is why I think that DFFE will be the best guy to guide us, even if they are the ones who go around collecting all these other checkpoints so that they can just bring them together in one guide. I think that can help us a lot, because I've got a situation right now whereby we've got a strategy and everyone is having every comment about how this is wrong and how that is right. And I, at a technical level and at the strategy level, would know that we are fully compliant. And if we move away from what we have done now, we are going to lose our global footing, we are going to lose our national footing, and therefore just our general technical compliance in terms of how a climate change response plan is supposed to be developed and implemented. It's because we are subjecting ourselves to every other, whoever is having a say in what we are doing, and they understand things in their own way. So to avoid all of that, based on what we have learned, just from a strategy alone, we really need to make sure that we don't go and look for who to verify us and to QC and QA us and what have you. DFFE must just help us with this, unless of course we are sitting, we are sure of what we are doing, but some form of uniformity would be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay. Noted all those points, and see how we can assist with that process in, developing, well, engaging with DFFE and providing guidelines. So we can certainly bring that up with them and see if we can find a way forward on that. I mean, we don't want to, when we're engaging with stakeholders, I mean, I think the main point for engaging with stakeholders is really to obtain data. And as you say, a lot of data providers don't know what you're doing. And I think that is is the problem, is we need to inform people as well of what it is we want to do in order to get information or data from them. But yeah, I think, you know, I can understand that maybe if people don't know, there are some negative feedbacks as well. So yeah, we can have a look at the, you know, speak with the FFE and see if there's any guidance that they can provide for you on that as well. Yes, Tabani.
No, thanks, Lou. And just a thought, is it possible for us in provinces to establish a community of practice where we can share best practice? The reason I'm saying that is it was interesting to learn that Western Cape has cracked it with Eskom, although there was a lot of to and fro. And I think there is something that we as KZN can learn from Western Cape in terms of how they were able to get through to Eskom in terms of the data that is sitting with them. And the whole issue of the disclosure agreements and stuff that they established. That's the one thing. The second one, in relation to the Afolo sector, sorry, I've been out of touch with the work for some time, so I don't know where progress is in terms of some of the developments. But with the Afolo sector, we had a challenge at the beginning with forestry and other land uses. We tried to contact colleagues in the Western Cape for assistance as well as national, and at that point in time, we didn't crack it. I don't know, my director will correct me if we've cracked that one. So it would be nice to have a community of practice where we share best practice and how you crack certain things that are difficult to crack. For example, certain data sets that are difficult to come across. It's just a wide thought in terms of how can we be able to establish that as provinces and collaborate so that we are able to learn from each other. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I think it's a really excellent idea, because I always find when you bring people together and you share information, you learn a whole lot, and everybody can learn from somebody else on small different things that they have done and achieved, and it does make the process a lot easier. So I would definitely support something like that, and maybe we can have a discussion now on what people think about that, and whether, you know, that might be a step in the process that you can have a look at setting up between the provinces. So maybe we can have a discussion around that. Yes, Matthew, do you have a comment?
Yes, yeah, I fully support the suggestion. We cannot overemphasize the importance of it. As the KZN team and Liz were speaking as well, we're thinking that we've also contacted KZN and Western Cape to an assistance as well. You would find that as we are contacting them, Eastern Cape or Free State is also doing the same as well. So that would be extremely helpful. There's some challenges that Liz has spoken about that we shouldn't experience at all, because now we're coming back years later and we're doing exactly the same thing that they've tried to do, and also maybe have some lessons. I fully support the suggestion. Thanks.
Yeah, so yeah, so maybe I don't know if anyone has any other thoughts on that, and you know how that process would work. It's maybe something we can have a discussion on as to whether I mean, I think it's a good idea. It's a case of we need to get a few heads together and think about how that process would work, and how it's possible to set it up. So if there are any other thoughts and suggestions on that, otherwise we can give it some thought and come back on the concept at a later date. I don't see any more hands at this stage, but I think it is a good idea. So maybe it's something we can think about and incorporate another discussion on it at a later stage in the project. Okay, made a note. Okay, yeah, and I mean, as I say, we also provide, we'll be able to provide some support to provinces. So if you do have any issues or queries, you can let us Brett or myself know, and then we can perhaps try to assist you with your needs going forward. Okay, so it's good that we're stimulating discussion from this diagram. We're not getting very far, but at least we're getting an understanding of the kind of activities that are relevant at a provincial level. So there's more activities on sort of manage and support the greenhouse gas inventory team would be usually assigned to your inventory coordinator, and to develop a work plan. As we said, that having a work plan is one of the tools that would be important, and so this would really be the person that's coordinating the inventory process. So someone would be responsible for developing terms of reference and contracts with consultants and experts. So again, you would need to decide who would have that responsibility, whether it is the inventory coordinator. Again, the roles are also, you may want to change the names of the roles as long as you have a structure laid out and make it relevant to your province. So someone would need to have development of TORs and contracts with consultants. And if you have any agreements, who would be responsible in the team for setting up those agreements with the data providers. There's a person that oversees the whole report compilation process. Identify and assign over inventory sector leads. Okay, some of these may be sort of duplicates of other tasks, so that's why you can go through them and decide if it's still relevant. Then there's a number of tasks around communication. I think communication is important, especially when you're working with a team. You need to communicate exactly with your team who's responsible for what. Communicate with the QA/QC coordinator in terms of what their responsibilities are and what the archive manager's responsibilities are. In terms of the provinces, we also spoke about there would be a need for someone to communicate perhaps to national departments or to local governments. So these might also be relevant responsibilities. Manage the overall QA/QC process. This may be the inventory coordinator that manages the overarching process, although your sector leads may be responsible for doing QC on their compilation files as well. So we should also say that the QA and the QC process are different. The quality control is doing the quality control checks on data and inventory calculations, for example, and then the QA is basically the overarching review of the whole inventory and the report. So again, this is more, you can decide it at a provincial level. I'm not sure whether provincial levels go through the whole process of external reviews or not. So this may or may not be relevant at the provincial level. So, but if it is, you need to assign who's going to be responsible for organizing those tasks. Areas we've already dealt with. Improvement plan. I know this is also a very big thing at a national level because there's international obligations to continuously improve. So maybe less important at a provincial level, but still important to consider and note down improvements for future inventories, so that, you know, if you jot them down in this inventory, when the next lot of inventory team starts to do a second round or an update, they can immediately see what was identified as potential areas for improvement. So someone will need to maintain an improvement plan. Also, someone has to approve the documents or the calculation files before you release it or submit it or open it up to the public, whatever it is. So you need to have someone that is responsible for those approval process. Links with fostering and establishing links with regional and national. Maybe that's similar to the communication points we mentioned above. Okay, then there was mention of a steering committee. Some may have steering committees. It's not always required in an inventory, but it's often, if it's a project-based, then it may have a steering committee, and so you may have people from district or municipal on a steering committee, and so there may be responsibilities for the steering committee. And then sector leads, there are various different responsibilities, and obviously really to obtain the data, engage with your stakeholders, to compile the inventory, to document the inventory, the methodologies, document any assumptions and models that you may have used, conduct quality control on your input data and on your calculation files to check that there's no errors. In terms of quality control, you're checking for errors. So with your quality control, there may be technical checks, and there may just be overarching checks that anybody could check. For example, if you're just checking that the numbers are adding up from one sheet to the other, that your summation, that doesn't necessarily need a technical understanding of the inventory process. So that could be much more, anybody could actually do those kind of general checks. But if you need technical checks in terms of, is the methodology correct, then you may need a different person to do those quality control checks. So there are different levels. We'll talk more about that in the next session. So, ensuring consistency of data, and coordinating with your archives manager to ensure that all the information and associated documents have been archived, and to also speak between the different sectors, if it's more than one person, to ensure that there's no double counting in any of the sectors. And you may have an MRV system, so it may be relevant to incorporate information into your MRV system. So who is going to be assigned to those responsibilities? And then there's a number of responsibilities for QA/QC coordinator. Again, as I say, I think also what is important though is to create a list that is reasonable for the province and is doable. So some of these may not be relevant at a provincial level in terms of setting up checklists and things like that. So there may not be resources to compile all these kind of checklists, so that may not be relevant at a provincial level. So whatever you do set up and whatever responsibilities you do assign, they must be achievable, sometimes, and we'll go over this with the QA/QC as well. I mean, you can set up hundreds of QA/QC checks, but if you don't have the resources to do all those checks, then rather make the list smaller and put the additional onto an improvement list for in future. So everything that you do and assign should be doable and achievable. Otherwise, it just becomes overwhelming. So there are a number of checks. So maybe having checklists is not something that is relevant at a provincial level. You may just have the coordinator ensuring that everybody has done their quality checks and that the quality checks have been documented and logged in the system. So, it may just be a simpler process. And if you have external reviews, then someone needs to coordinate and respond to the comments from the external review. So that would be a responsibility that needs to be assigned to someone as well. I don't think anyone's going to have a document manager, but it's basically the person that compiles the inventory report overall. Just need to ensure that everything is complete and checked within the report. Everything is in the report, and that it gets produced on time. And then, of course, your archive manager has responsibilities of communicating the archiving system and the procedures for labeling the files, must be communicated to the team. So that would be on archive manager, and determine the tasks that the various different sector leads or other people in the team need to do in terms of archiving, and ensure that archiving is carried out and that all files are actually archived. So, so these are just a list of various different tasks that you may want to assign to the various different people on the team. Again, as I say, you may also come up with additional responsibilities that you feel are maybe more relevant to your province or at a provincial level that you can add to this list. So I don't know if there's any other inputs or comments on that. Let's see.
It's a very comprehensive list. Thank you so much, Luwin. I think we're going to then sit as provinces and then have a look at and then populate this particular part of the spreadsheet you've given us. Yes.
Yeah, so you can have a look at this. As I say, these are really guidelines, and so you know, it's not to say that all these responsibilities are in there or in these tasks. So you can have a look at them as a province to see what suits you, and then fill in this sheet and start to build up your roles and responsibilities for your inventory team. And then this sort of document, once you've had this, I mean, producing then an organogram from that would also be useful. That shows the links between the different organizations and how the information flows from one organization to another. And then these would form part of your institutional arrangements that would need to be archived along with your inventory, or even documented in the inventory. And then once you have these, it's also good, as I say, if people leave, then the next person that comes in and does the inventory has all the information easily on hand. If they need to refer back to somebody, they know who to contact. And so it's easily available. So yeah, so I think that you can go away and have a look at that and fill in the sheet for yourselves. As I say, because I need to see what the time, yeah, we're up to our time. So I think that also, as I mentioned, Brett and I do have some support time for the various different provinces. So we can provide support, as we said from our last one, on inventory preparation. But if you have any questions or needs from us in terms of institutional arrangements, we can also assist with that. So you just need to get in touch with us, and we can set up a meeting specifically with your province to make it more relevant to your province. Yeah, so I don't know if there's any other input. Brett, do you have anything else to add at this point?
No, nothing from my side, except just to reiterate that we look forward to working with you on an individual basis where we can best contribute.
Yeah. So yeah, and so the next, yeah, so if everybody, I hope everybody has filled in the registration link, just because then we can, it just helps us to keep in contact with everybody. But feel free to get hold of us. I think that at this stage we can also say that our next session will be on the QA/QC, and there was quite a lot of questions on this. So I'm hoping we will have a lively discussion during that stage, that session as well. Filling, what was that? What's the date of that? Was that is Filling still online? Sorry, I can't see. The 23rd. Okay, so you will be getting an invite again to the QA/QC session, which will be on the 23rd of April. And so we can have more discussions on that. So if you have any questions from your province on QA/QC, you can bring those along so we can also engage with you on those questions. Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, Brett.
And sorry, Luann, maybe also if there's anything you'd like us to cover in that session, you know, to help us shape the session, that you let us know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I mean, there's lots are various different things to discuss, but if you have something in particular, we can maybe address that during the session. Martin, are you still online?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I don't know if you want to have any words to end the session.
No, I think it was a very positive session. Lots of people attended, so thank you everybody for attending. The recording of the session will be made available, as well as the presentations and the spreadsheets. We'll gather all of that into a central place for people to have access to. So yes, thanks to you, Luann, and Brett for coordinating the session, and we appreciate everybody's attendance and look forward to the next session on the 23rd.
Great. Thanks,
Good.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for your participation.
Yeah, it was good discussions.
Thank you.
Thank you
Have a
very
nice day.
much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.